The wind pressed against the wooden walls of the ranch house, carrying with it the kind of loneliness that seeps into a man's bones. Inside, the fire crackled, but its warmth could not fill the empty chair by the hearth. John Whitmore sat with his elbows on his knees, his eyes fixed on the flames, though his thoughts wandered somewhere far darker. The old clock ticked steadily on the mantel, its sound louder in the silence than ever before. Just 3 weeks ago, that silence would have been broken by the soft humming of his wife, Clara, as she moved about the kitchen, or by the sweet sound of her laughter as she teased him for being too serious. But Clara was gone now, taken swiftly and cruelly by the fever that swept through the valley. She left behind not just the hollow ache in John's chest, but also the tiny, fragile life bundled in the cradle beside him. The baby stirred and whimpered, a thin cry filling the cabin. John's head lifted slowly, his eyes tired, red-rimmed from too many nights without sleep. He pushed himself up, crossed into the cradle, and lifted his son. No, his daughter. Clara had chosen the name before she passed. Mary! She had whispered it with her last breath, her hand clutching John's as tears had filled his eyes. Now every time he spoke it, his throat closed up. Mary's little mouth opened wide as she cried harder, her face reddening with hunger. John rocked her awkwardly, whispering in a low, broken voice, "Hush now, baby girl. Hush." His arms were strong from years of ranch work, but when it came to holding such a tiny life, he felt clumsy, unsure. His calloused hands seemed too rough, his movements too unsteady. She needed her mother, and her mother was gone. For days now, John had tried everything. He had warmed cow's milk on the stove, softened bits of bread into water, even asked one of the older neighbors in town for advice. Nothing worked. The baby was growing weaker, and so was he. He hadn't eaten properly himself, too consumed with grief and worry. Some nights he would sit in the rocker by the fire with Mary against his chest, listening to her cry until she fell into exhausted sleep. He often wondered if she would survive this winter at all, and if he had the strength to keep her alive. Outside, the ranch was falling into disrepair. Fences leaned where cattle had broken through. The barn roof sagged under early snow, and the fields lay bare and unattended. John didn't care. None of it seemed to matter compared to the life of the child in his arms. If he failed her, what was the point of the land, or the cattle, or even his own breath? On this night, the snow tapped at the window panes like cold fingers. The fire burned low, throwing shadows across the log walls. John sat back down in the chair, cradling Mary as she wailed in hunger. He pressed his forehead to hers, whispering, "I don't know what to do, little one. I just don't know." His voice cracked. "Your mama would have known. She always knew."
His shoulders shook as he let the tears come. He hadn't wanted to cry in front of the baby before. Somehow it seemed like a weakness, something that might frighten her. But tonight the weight was too much. His sobs mingled with Mary's cries, filling the cabin with sorrow that seemed to echo off the walls. And then it happened, a sound. Not the crack of wood in the fire or the creak of the old beams in the roof. No, this was something sharp, sudden, alive. A knock at the door. John froze. Out here miles from town, visitors didn't come at night. His heart pounded as he glanced at the door. The knock came again, firm, deliberate. He swallowed hard, his mind racing with possibilities. A neighbor? A stranger? Someone in trouble? Slowly he rose, still holding Mary against his chest, and moved to the door. When he pulled it open, the cold night air rushed in, carrying snowflakes that swirled into the warmth of the cabin. And there she stood, a woman, her hair damp with snow, her cheeks flushed from the wind, her cloak pulled tightly around her shoulders. Her eyes were steady, though filled with something John hadn't seen in a long time, determination. "I heard the baby crying," she said softly, her voice trembling but strong enough to cut through the storm. "And I came." John stared at her, speechless. Mary whimpered against his chest, her tiny fists clenched in hunger. The woman's eyes flickered to the child and she stepped forward. "Let me help." John's lips parted, but no words came. In his heart, a spark, faint but undeniable, flickered to life. For the first time since Clara's passing, the silence of the cabin was broken not by grief, but by the arrival of something unexpected. Hope. Snowflakes swirled in through the open doorway as the woman stepped inside, pulling the heavy cloak from her shoulders. Her hair, dark and wet from the storm, clung to her cheeks. And her eyes, clear, deep, and unwavering, settled on the baby still wailing in John's arms. She moved with the steady confidence of someone who knew her purpose. And though John's instinct was to hold back, to guard the fragile world he had left, he found himself yielding to her presence. Without asking permission, she reached for Mary. John hesitated, his grip tightening protectively. But the stranger's gaze met his with a quiet strength that made his resistance falter. "She's hungry," the woman whispered, "and I can give her what she needs." The words struck him like a blow, awakening both relief and shame. Relief because the child might finally be fed. Shame because he, her father, had not been enough. Slowly, almost painfully, John extended Mary toward the woman. She took the baby with a gentleness that startled him, as though she'd been made for this moment. She sat down in the chair by the fire, cradling the child against her breast. With practiced ease, she loosened the front of her dress, and in moments the cries softened into small, desperate suckles. John stood frozen watching. He should have looked away, perhaps, out of respect, out of modesty, but he couldn't. His daughter was drinking deeply for the first time in days, and the sound of it, the steady rhythm, the satisfied sighs was like a balm to his weary soul. He pressed a hand to his face, choking back a sob. "Thank you," he managed, his voice breaking. "God above, thank you." The woman glanced up, her lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Her name?" "Mary," John whispered, his throat tightening as the name left his lips. The woman repeated it softly, almost like a prayer. "Mary, she'll live now." For a long time, neither spoke. The crackle of the fire filled the cabin, mixing with the quiet sounds of a baby feeding. John lowered himself into the chair across from them, his eyes never leaving his daughter's tiny face. When at last the child grew drowsy and pulled away, the stranger adjusted her dress and held the baby close, rocking her gently. John finally found the courage to ask, "Who are you?" The woman lifted her gaze, meeting his eyes with something unreadable. "My name is Eliza. I was traveling west when the storm caught me. I stopped at the neighbor's place down the ridge, but they said you were alone here, with the baby." They heard her cry. He swallowed hard. "Alone, that's the truth of it." His voice dropped, rough as gravel. "My wife, she passed." "I'm sorry," Eliza murmured, and there was no pity in her voice, only understanding. "I know what it is to lose." The words hung between them like an unspoken bond. Outside, the wind howled against the shutters. Inside, the baby now slept in Eliza's arms, her tiny fist curled against her cheek. John stared at them, a strange mixture of gratitude and fear twisting inside him. He hadn't asked for help. He hadn't even dared hope for it. And yet here was this woman, a stranger, saving his child in the most intimate way possible. Part of him wanted to demand answers. Who was she, really? Why was she alone, traveling through storms? What did she want in return? But another part of him, deeper, quieter, more desperate, begged him not to question it, not to risk losing this unexpected gift. At length he cleared his throat. You're welcome to stay here, at least until the storm passes." Eliza gave a small nod, her eyes dropping back to the sleeping child. "For her sake, I will." For the first time in weeks, John felt a weight lift from his chest. It wasn't joy, not yet, but it was something he had almost forgotten existed. A fragile thread of hope woven through the sorrow. And though he didn't know it yet, this night, the knock at the door, the stranger with full breasts and an unyielding spirit was the beginning of a story that would change everything he thought. He knew about love, loss, and second chances.